Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful episode of Paranormal Minds. I'm your host, Shannon Ray, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in this Tuesday evening. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce, tonight we're going to have special guest Jodi Foster, who is the author of Forgotten Burial. And her daughter, Hannah, is also joining us. Even though I don't have a bio on Hannah, I am going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about Jodi and Forgotten Burial. Forgotten Burial is a novel of suspense, ray humor, life after death, and the supernatural. A story about identifying, accepting, and embracing spiritual gifts. It is a non-fiction account of actual events linked to a well-known murder and abduction case that reached sensational proportions in the mid-1980s, bringing to light the term Stockholm Syndrome. The story has gathered a growing momentum of interest internationally and nationally ever since, and was remembered once again due to the J.C. Dugard kidnapping. Old enough to be fading from local memory, the tale of a Red Bluff kidnapping, torture, enslavement victim, and sexual enslavement victim of Colleen Stan, dubbed the Girl in the Box, grabbed national headlines during much of 1984. Jodi Foster had never heard of the case when she moved in to her Chico, California apartment in 1999. But that was before she found herself in the unknown darker underbelly of this already dark public story involving Carmen Hooker, whose wife Janice Hooker was alleged murder victim Marie Elizabeth Spanicki. Shortly after moving into her apartment, Foster began to feel the presence of an unknown entity. Her young daughter Hannah, who is also joining us right now, had seen an angel following her mother from room to room. Foster was soon plagued with haunting nightmares of abduction, murder, and secret burial. Lights flashed on and off and on, and hands on the clock turned. A sing and snort Eeyore doll yelled, "I feel great, I feel great," and an angel named My Liz appeared to a young child. This was just the first night in a new apartment. This true paranormal mystery might just scare the skeptic right out of you and inspire you at the same time. It is a story of inhumanity, and stolen innocence is neither easy to tell nor to hear. Forgotten Burial is both extremely disturbing, yet ultimately uplifting, as we follow the author's journey from terror to understanding and right action. Jodi is represented by Don Hardy of Serendipity Literary Agency. And without further ado, I would like to bring in Jodi. Hi, Jodi. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you? Good.
I'm doing excellent, and I'm so glad to have you with me this evening. So before, and I know Hannah's there too. Hi, Hannah. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Great. So before we get started, Jodi, I kind of need to ask you, before you guys moved into this apartment, had either you or your daughter had any other kind of previous paranormal experiences?
Well, I actually wrote about that in my book, Forgotten Burial. When I was younger, I actually did have some paranormal experience. However, I didn't really know at the time what paranormal was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did have some experiences growing up as a child in Bear Creek, California. And I wrote about that in my book. So, but the places I got this whole, I think they were kind of like where I understand it was a paranormal and we thought that.
Are you there, Jodi? I hope you didn't break up. You were breaking up a little bit there towards the end.
Well, can
You there?
hello?
Hey, I can hear you now. So one of those things, can you hear me now?
That's okay. I know. These cell phones and Skyping and interference, you just never know what's happening nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. So before, I know Hannah was really young when you guys moved into that apartment, but had she previously had any experiences, Hannah? Had you?
No, not. That was Hannah's first paranormal experience when she was a little girl.
So you moved into this apartment, and all this crazy stuff happened on the first night. A lot of people would say, why in the heck didn't you just move out and head for the hills instantly?
Well, actually, when we were experiencing what we did, it was kind of like mind-boggling. And at first, you kind of try to rationalize what you're experiencing. So you know, when you move into a place, you don't think that something paranormal is going to be happening, and then when it does start to happen, you kind of start questioning reality, your sanity, and is this even real? And so at first, I just, you know, kind of experienced what I did. And can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, because I lost you for a second.
Yeah.
So the reason we didn't hightail it out of there immediately is because because I was trying to come to terms with what was actually going on. You know, I didn't know that there was something paranormal going on. It was kind of an unfolding process, and so we didn't hightail it out of there until an extremely scary situation happened where there was no denying that it was something paranormal, and so that's kind of when the journey began. Mm-hmm. It was, you know, it was stuff. It was all leading up to this one night where I actually, you know, was like, I am not staying in here anymore at all. Nothing. I'm out of here.
Yeah. Before, you know, you left, did you ever try to, you know, contact any, you know, kind of investigators to see if anybody could come in there and help you, or you just weren't that aware of that kind of, you know, that kind of stuff?
Well, in the year 2000 when it happened, you know, there weren't really TV shows on about, you know, the paranormal or anything like that. And because I was raised a Christian, I didn't really know where to turn or what to do or who to explain this stuff to. So no, we never did have any kind of a team come out to investigate. But we did have, I did have my church come out and do a blessing and a cleansing just because we didn't know what was going on. And so that was as far as I had gone up to that point in the year 2000.
Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and kind of switch gears to the book and the book itself. And, you know, in some of these, you know, like if, you know, I know Hannah was kind of young, but maybe like her experiences too, you know, what she can remember, I guess I should say. But the book itself is called Forgotten Burial, A Cry for Justice from Beyond the Grave. And Jodi's website is also up on your screen, which it will be on your screen throughout the night. And it's www.jodifoster.net. So let's talk about the book. And I understand that the book is connected to a nationally known criminal, Cameron Hooker, known as the 7-year sex slave abduction case, a.k.a. the girl in the box. Can you explain that connection to your apartment?
Yeah. Well, it's a very long and disturbing story, but I cover this in detail in Forgotten Burial. How it unfolded was my daughter and I and some other friends, you know, had experienced paranormal activity in the apartment. And so on the last day that we were there, when it pretty much culminated into this extremely scary event where there was, like I said before, there was no way I was going to stay in there. I was sitting out at the poolside crying with Hannah, just wondering what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there crying and just thinking, what am I going to do now? I can't go back into my apartment. I don't have any money. And the manager who was managing the apartment complex, and I write about this in Forgotten Burial, she actually, she experienced something as well. So we all knew that there was something paranormal going on. Mm-hmm. So when I was sitting out there at the pool crying, one of the old-timers who had lived there many, many years, his name was John, he came up to me and he said, why are you crying, honey? Is everything okay? And I was holding Hannah, and I said, I'm like, no, nothing, I'm not okay. Nothing's okay. I'm really scared. And I go, I know this sounds really crazy, but I can't go back into my apartment. There's some really weird stuff going on in there. And he kind of looked at me with kind of a shocked but understanding look on his face, and he said, well, you know, honey, I've lived here so many years. I think he's lived there for 25 or 30 years. And he said, nobody lives in that apartment for very long. They all move out pretty quickly. And I'm like, why? Why? And, you know, he goes, well, you know, I don't really know much about this, but I recall there being a girl who went missing from that apartment in 1976. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? What are you talking about? What?
Yeah.
And so he said, yeah, and in fact, I don't remember the name of the girl, but somehow I remember it being connected to a nationally known criminal. And I said, well, who, what? You know, I'm trying to decipher what the heck he's talking about. And he said, well, all I can remember is, you know, it's connected to a 7-year sexual abduction case from Red Bluff, California that made national and international headlines. And so I kind of like my heart starts racing and I'm like, okay, something's going on here. Missing person, 7-year sex slave, you know, who is this person? Who's this criminal? So I went to basically hightailed it out of the pool, you know, where I was sitting by the pool with my kid, Hannah, and I ran to the manager and I'm like, there really is something going on. You know, I think there's a missing girl, and that's when the secondary part to my story, you know, starts. It's trying to figure out who this missing person was. Because while I was in that apartment, not only did paranormal activity start happening, but there was, I kept having nightmares of abduction and murder and a secret burial and numbers and, you know, numbers of where a person might have been taken and buried. So it kind of all came full circle right there at the poolside, where I realized, because of old John, that there is something really going on, and it is paranormal, and no one has lived there very long.
Yeah. So when, you know, going back to when you first found out about this case and the steps that you took after, was this case ever solved, or did anything that you've discovered helped you solve this case further?
Well, when I eventually had enough courage to go to the police, this was in the year 2008, actually. So this is a very long, you know, story. This is a story that took almost a decade for me to figure out who it was and what was going on. Mm-hmm. To have the courage to actually go to the police with the information that I was given. And all I know at this point in time is that the case remains an open murder investigation. But the information that I had was, according to the detectives and the FBI, very, very helpful in the missing persons case from 1976. Mm-hmm. I can't tell anybody whether or not the body has been discovered, but because it's an open murder case, I can say that I know that they're currently working on it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that have happened since I've come forward that actually I'm writing about in a second book, which is called It's a Matter of Perception, which will be out probably in 2015. Mm-hmm. So as far as having the case solved, I can't say that it's been resolved, but I know that they're in the process of bringing this case to bring the case to justice. I know that for sure.
So how old was Hannah when all of this stuff started in the apartment? Like when you guys first moved in, how old was she?
She was 3.5, and so at 3.5, she was very verbal, and she's a very smart kid, and so, we had adult conversations. She was very articulate and, verbal, and was able to, communicate extremely well. And so she would say things to me like, "Mommy, who's that lady in the house that follows us around?" And I would be like, "What are you talking about, honey? Who?" And at first I assumed she had an imaginary friend, like most little kids have,
Mm-hmm.
But because of the strange paranormal activity, my nerves were just on end, wondering what was really going on at the time. Now, her experience was not negative whatsoever, but mine seemed negative by the way I was perceiving things.
Mm-hmm. So
Her experience was that she would see somebody and that she would talk to somebody, and she thought that this person who was in the apartment with us was a solid human being just like you and I.
Mm-hmm. So what is some of her first experiences that she does remember?
Well, I think she remembers basically seeing her in a mirror while we were in the bathroom, and then walking in the house in she used to tell me she wore white pajamas or maybe a white shirt or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically she would kiss her on the head, or sometimes, I guess she would talk, but not really talk in the sense, verbally, but I guess kind of what would you call it, telepathically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that was the situation. And so, so Hannah had these, basically these experiences of seeing a person, experiencing a person who was nice and kind, and kissed her on the head, and just kind of walked around the house and followed us.
Yeah. Do you believe that you encountered the more darker aspects of this spirit because she was wanting you to help her, and the only way she knew to do that was to kind of show you what she knew?
Well, I think so. I mean, I've tried to, logically think this through, and I think that, the paranormal is just so strange, and we don't fully understand it. But what I've come to understand is that the way we view things, whether they're negative or positive, is a matter of perception. And so therefore, the things that I was experiencing, yes, were things that were showing me a murder in a dream, abduction in a dream, things that, seemed extremely real.
Mm-hmm.
And then also dreaming about a specific location, being in the dream myself, and being where this person was taken and buried. Now, that seemed scary at the time to me, but now looking back, I realized that wasn't necessarily scary. The things that happened were scary to the missing person, who her name is Marie Elizabeth Stanicky. But yes, to me they were scary, but now looking back, like I said, it's wow, that was just a matter of perception, and it was just clues given to me through a spirit who wanted to be remembered, who wanted justice to be served, and wanted to share information about a situation regarding her abductor, captor, and murderer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for me, perceiving it as scary and negative was at the time, yes, terrifying, scary, overwhelming, didn't know where to turn. There were no shows on TV, no radio shows. No, the internet wasn't as popular as it is, basically 14 years later.
No, it wasn't.
A decade and a half later, you can pretty much Google anything. But in the year 2000, I didn't know what was going on, and it was terrifying. And I was raised, like I said, a Christian, so who do you turn to?
Yeah.
So Hannah's interpretation of what was going on in the apartment was extremely different than mine in the sense that she was not fearful, scared, or worried on any level whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, because I was having dreams of murder, abduction, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Hannah never mentioned anything about that. However, she did draw some pictures and explained to me that this couple hurt my angel. And the pictures that she drew were extremely vivid and frightening to me as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Because she said, they cut her throat and things like that. And she expressed that in these little pictures she drew. So that was concerning to me. But Hannah's perception of what was going on was just basically like relaying information to me. Oh, hey, Mom, did you know this happened? And I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, like I've noticed, like when I did the research and I looked into the book, you kind of categorize this as a spiritual journey for you. How do you perceive that, everything that happened, as a spiritual journey?
Well, I see it as a spiritual awakening, and when I say spiritual awakening, meaning that my belief in God and higher power, whatever you want to call it, that there is another spiritual realm other than this reality that we live in right now. So, my experience living in the haunted house was terrifying at the time and overwhelming and really scary, but ultimately deepened my belief in God, a higher existence, justice, and really made me know, that there is something other than just, life as we know it right now. Mm-hmm. And so I call my story much more than a ghost story, because it was like an evolution of, spirit, soul, and understanding.
Mm-hmm. Now, I understand that you lived in the apartment, and the girl that was abducted by these two people, allegedly, I'm assuming I should still say that, Cameron Hooker and his wife, had taken her and held her captive, for, 7 years it was?
That was their second victim. The first victim, Marie Elizabeth Stanicky, was only held a short period of time. But
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. How many different victims, I guess, did they have?
Well, according to what I know right now, for sure there were two, Colleen Stan and Marie Elizabeth Stanicky. However, he's suspected of having more victims than that. And I did, in one of my dreams, have a vision of a young, blonde, 16-year-old girl, but I don't know what happened to her. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not really sure, other than of an abduction. So there's a suspicion that he might have been connected to a crime that happened. I believe it was in Sacramento.
So, from my understanding, Cameron Hooker's wife did realize what he was doing, correct?
Oh, absolutely. She absolutely was a co-conspirator and a co-partner in crime that they both committed, even though later on, in the Colleen Stan trial, when they came to trial for the abduction and kidnapping of Colleen Stan, she claimed she was also a victim of circumstance, of Cameron's sadistic and twisted sexual deviance. However, he was a part of it from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And he had helped to abduct these women and helped capture them, and there's some really twisted things that she did as as a partner in crime. However, she never had to pay for her crime. She turned state evidence against her husband in the Colleen Stan trial,
and so never had to pay. Now, what I mean, in essence, I guess I should ask, what type of justice was or was not served upon both of them?
There was no justice that has come forth for Colleen Stan and Janice Hooker, who is a part of this also, there was nothing, I mean, she has not paid for her crimes whatsoever at all. She's actually running loose to this day.
Oh, she's alive still.
Janice is Cameron Hooker's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, she is actually running amok today, which there's a lot of information about Janice in my book that people will be shocked and appalled at once they read Forgotten Burial.
So what about him? What happened to him? Did he do jail time? How did that transpire?
He went to prison for 104 years for the sexual kidnapping, torture, rape of Colleen Stan. However, he came up for parole in 2012, but he didn't make parole. His exit date from prison is 2022. So unless the police can get the murder of Marie Elizabeth Stanicky pulled together before then, he would be released. But according to some sources that I have spoken with, that is not going to happen. Basically, they've told me he will not be getting out of prison. He will, be in prison for the rest of his life.
So how old, I mean, these people have to be getting on up in age. I mean, how old are these folks?
They're in their 50s at this point.
So they had to have been like super young doing this crazy stuff.
Yeah, when they started out doing this, they made a pact. Janice and Cameron Hooker had made a pact with one another that if Cameron could have sexual slaves and hold them in a basement, which they prepared in their home in Red Bluff, California for this situation, then Janice would be able to have his babies. Now, that just seems a little strange to me because they were already married and they just at a young age. So there's accountability on the part of Janice as well. However, Janice has never been accountable for any of her partaking in any of these crimes, which I find extremely appalling.
Yeah, I mean, she obviously knew what was going on with these girls and never once said anything, and it obviously happened for years.
For years. It wasn't a one-time thing. This was an ongoing situation, and she was an accomplice. Yeah. And a lot of things that I've understood from this point forward was that she, too, had sexual deviance and behaviors, and this was also part of her idea, not just Cameron. So, not that I'm defending Cameron on any level whatsoever, but I believe that Janice also was, should be held accountable for the fact that she, was participating in these behaviors as well. It wasn't, it wasn't just Cameron Hooker. And she actually is the one who came up with a slavery contract to give to Colleen Stan to make her think that she was an actual slave in 1977.
So, I mean, okay, look at this from a realistic standpoint. I mean, these girls were victims. I mean, both of these people are monsters, and yet she's been loose and free on the streets to do whatever in the hell she wants to do. I mean, is there any point where the California Department of Justice goes, hey, maybe we dropped the ball a little bit here?
Well, that's what my thought is too. I'm thinking, what is going on a political level that has not allowed this case or this situation to be brought to justice in a way that it should be? Yeah. And I don't fully understand. I know personally from working with the police that this is a very shady situation, and I think that there are more people involved than they want to let on. They want the mass population to know about. And I think that there were some people higher up in, say, the political arena in the town that they lived in. Though the town was very small in 1976, it was still, it was like a good old boys kind of situation. Mm-hmm. And so my belief is that there are people that know the full story that are also involved in the story that don't want to be brought into the picture, and so therefore there's a lot of things that the current law enforcement, they have to investigate and they have to get to the bottom of. So it's not a cut and dry case.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Cameron Hooker for a moment, because it sounds to me like him and his wife almost got preferential treatment in a Justice Department. Did he hold some kind of higher office or some kind of influential position within that community, or?
Well, from what I understand, Cameron Hooker and Janice Hooker have lived in the community for, years. Their parents both lived in the community. Now, I know that Cameron Hooker's parents were not influential at all, but I think that possibly Janice's family was a little more favorable. Now, the thing that comes to me, and I know that this sounds a little strange, but because it was a small town and the prosecuting attorney was connected romantically with the district attorney, I think that there was a situation with, like, everybody, who's sleeping with who and whose family knows whose family, that kind of thing. It's a very disturbing, situation. And I think that at the time, if you read my book and then you read the court documents of the case, it's a very, politically, it's just very, disturbing. And I think that they dropped the ball a long time ago on this one.
Oh, yeah. And, there's no doubt in my mind why some of the victims, I'm sure even Colleen would be crying out from beyond the grave, so to speak. Because you're talking about monsters, people who were monsters, You're not talking about a passionate moment where you just lose your cool and see black and kill somebody. You're talking about monsters, people who sexually tortured and captured and enslaved and then ended up killing young girls. These people are monsters.
Exactly. And there are rumors that go around this area that there really was not a company of sexual slaves like Janice led Colleen stand to believe, but that it was the swinging 70s, and there was a lot of promiscuity and a lot of wife swapping and different things like that going on in this small town. And, so I think that is part of the reason why this situation exists, because it was a small town and there were more people involved. Mm-hmm. And they let, Janice go. And, the prosecuting attorney, she's an interesting character. Her name is Christine McGuire, and if you Google her, she's a political person down, I believe, in the Bay Area now, running for some kind of, like, Congress, or I don't know, something like that. So I don't understand the whole scenario, although it just seems like even then, with the prosecuting attorney and the police involved in '76, there was, like I said, a lot of bed hopping and swapping and a lot of things that were going on that shouldn't have been, and it shouldn't have come up, or that should have, come up in a trial but did not.
Yeah. Because it seemed maybe that, people were trying to save their own reputations.
Absolutely. Everyone had a reputation in a small town to keep, and this story made international and national headlines. So it was covered in, Time magazine. It was like.
So at what point did since it did get national coverage, how did this slack form of punishment was it able to, go by and nobody protest that?
That is the question that I have to this day, and I don't understand how this is happening. And, even now, when I have brought this story to the public's attention, certain people are appalled, and then certain people are like, we need to keep this under the rug. We need to be quiet about this situation.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, my whole thing is, you would have thought that at some point maybe the California Supreme Court or the higher up judicial actual state, you know, judicial system maybe would have looked into this when the punishment didn't fit the crime.
Well, you would think so. I mean, I would think so too, but I think it's a lot of, you know, political, like, you know, bed hopping and swapping. Like I said, I mean, this is a really what's the word? It's a multi-layered story that has, like, it's intertwined with, like, political things and small town and, you know, money, stuff like that. And so it's just really, it's a disturbing case on many, many levels that just, you know, need resolution, you know. And so when I think of resolution, I think, okay, how can me, Jodi, a little lady and her child that come from Montana, how did I get catapulted into this gigantic windstorm of a situation?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that because it was, you know, swept under the rug, and because certain people were, I mean, oh my gosh, when you read Forgotten Burial, you're going to be even more, like, shocked and appalled at the scenario. But it makes sense, you know, that I was born a sensitive person, Hannah was a sensitive person, and it makes sense why the complex was haunted once you read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that resolution has completely come, you know, full circle, but there is a portion of resolution that has happened because of the awareness of the murder, because of the awareness of the haunting, because of, you know, our speaking out and our sharing our story. There's a lot more awareness now of where these people are, and of the political, like, mayhem, and of the political, like, uproar in that town, and the bed swapping and the, you know, who knows who kind of stuff. I mean, so resolution comes in all kinds of shapes and forms. And I think that right now, though the story is still, excuse me, not completely, the murder hasn't gone to trial yet, there will be resolution in people's minds once they read Forgotten Burial and a deeper understanding of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Now, to this day, are Cameron Hooker and his wife still married?
No, they're not. And that's another thing that's really interesting to me, is that when the Hookers lived in Red Bluff from 1975, I think it was 75, 76 through 1984. They lived in this one part of town where they had neighbors that they were known as the Copas, and they lived next door to the Hookers. So the Copas, Coppas, lived next door to Cameron and Jenna Hooker. Well, after Cameron Hooker got convicted and she turned state's evidence against, you know, Cameron, Janice did, Janice, divorced Cameron and married the next door neighbor.
But wasn't the next door neighbor married, or no?
Yes. So there was a divorce, and there was Janice married Alfred Copa, who was the next door neighbor.
And is she currently still married to him?
And no, she eventually divorced him in 2005, and now she goes by the last name of Lashley, which I believe was her maiden name.
Uh-huh. So does she have kids, grandkids? I mean, honestly, like, I mean, I'm just trying to understand how these people do such monstrous acts and then go on and act like everything's fine in life and
Yeah.
get married and remarried. And I mean, do their kids know what in the hell happened? You know, kind of deal.
Well, so what ended up happening is Janice and Cameron, actually, when Janice was helping her husband murder and abduct Marie Elizabeth Fantasy, she was pregnant with their first kid. So this is going on all along the same time she was pregnant. Then when when they picked up Colleen Stan, the baby was, I think, a year old, and so they actually had a baby when they picked up, Colleen Stan. Janice got pregnant while they had Colleen Stan as a sex slave for 7 years and gave birth. This is just disgusting to me. On their waterbed, on top of Colleen Stan, who was in a coffin underneath their bed. So Janice Hooker gave birth to their second child while Colleen Stan, their sex slave, was in a coffin alive underneath their waterbed.
None of this sounded extremely, just effed up to anybody that heard this back in the day. I mean, come on.
Exactly. And I'm like, okay, so these kids now, the Hooker children, are in their 30s, early 30s.
Uh-huh.
And at one point in time, I tried to get a hold of one of the Hooker children. Her name is, Christy and Ashley. Or Christy, hold on. I know the first one's Christy, and I can't remember. I think it's Ashley or Ashlyn, something like that. And, because I was trying to figure out what was going on over the years, and what did they think about the scenario. And they actually threatened me. Because they live up in, one of them lives in Washington and went to school to become a nurse. And basically, and I kind of understand because I wrote an email out of the blue trying to get in contact with her, wondering why her mother and father have not been accountable for this situation, which they were well aware of because Colleen Stan was used as their live-in babysitter. Now, I know that they weren't, privy to all the dirty details of the sexual relationship or the fact that there was a murder, but they are aware of that now that they're older.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make sense to me, why this continues. And then basically they said to leave their mother alone and if I did not leave their mother alone and stop talking about this situation, that I would be sued for something. I don't know. What is it called?
Sued for what? Like telling the truth? Like seriously?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not like you're slandering them and telling like lies. I mean, this crap's like open public record in court because her husband went and did this. She turned state's evidence against him, obviously knowing that she knew it and knew what was going on for all these years. She's a crazy bitch, just like he was. I mean, excuse my French, but...
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I try to, bring awareness, I come into contact with certain people that are like, you need to be quiet, or we're going to sue you. And then I come into other people that are like, why hasn't this situation been brought to justice? And I'm like, well, that is a good question, because, like I said, it is so multi-layered and political that it's just disturbing.
Yeah, it is truly disturbing. And, I know what went on with you, as far as the paranormal occurrences that you had going on in the apartment that you were in were, I'm sure, terrifying. But, at the same time, I have to think that, thank God someone was there that could have brought light and some form of justice, and acknowledgement to what happened to these two poor girls. Because it seems like nobody else wants to talk about it.
Well, absolutely. And here's the thing. It wasn't just, that there was, I don't mean to make light of this on any level whatsoever, but there was a murder, there was an abduction, a kidnapping, sexual torture situation with Colleen Stan. But later on in life, there were other victims of Janice Hooker. And so therefore, I am trying to bring to light that situation as well. And so therefore that's what's kind of like upsetting certain people in the small town, wondering, you know, why do you want to keep, you know, going on with this information?
So did Janice Hooker claim when all this came to light that she at some point was like a victim of Cameron's or something, and that it just turned into like a kind of Stockholm syndrome thing and she married him? I mean, what's the reality of what she claimed it was?
Well, from what I understand, she tried to claim that she too was a victim of domestic abuse and sexual sadomasochism. But what disturbs me is that she was a super intelligent person, and she was doing this for many, many years, and she too was getting her jollies by, you know, torturing Colleen Stan and doing terrible things to her, and to Marie Elizabeth Stanicky. So her defense in court was that she too experienced some kind of Stockholm syndrome and, you know, blah blah blah. But what I understood it to be, when I did my research, was that there was jealousy between Colleen Stan and Janice Hooker, because Cameron was wanting to have children with Colleen Stan, and Colleen was she was okay with having children. You know, even though she was a 7-year sex slave, she said yes, and she fell in love with, you know, Cameron and wanted to have children. And so as soon as that situation came up, that's when Janice Hooker decided that that wasn't going to happen, and so that's when she turned her husband in for this crime, because she got jealous and didn't want her husband. She wanted to keep her husband for herself, and she wanted the things that were happening to continue to happen. Having a sexual slave that she could torture.
So as far as Colleen goes, they did kill her, correct?
They did not kill her. Colleen Stan is alive, and she lives in Northern California here, close to where she was abducted. And she kind of has a tragic story. She's very religious now, which is kind of understandable. But she went on 3 years after she was let out of the box and Cameron Hooker was in jail. She had a child with somebody, and that situation turned out really disturbing as well. And that's a lot of the things that people don't want to talk about or don't know who, you know, of course, who wants their dirty laundry aired into the whole wide world? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's serious things, like her daughter actually ended up being involved in a murder herself. So Colleen Stan, the 7-year sex slave's daughter, was an accomplice to murder when she was 16 years old. Her and her friend plotted to kill her best friend's mother, and the best friend and 3 other people actually did end up murdering somebody.
Oh my Lord. So,
yeah.
I mean, do you think eventually they would have killed Colleen if what happened wouldn't have happened?
You know, I don't think that Colleen would have gotten killed, because I believe that Colleen Stan and Cameron Hooker ended up, you know, falling in love. And I think that Colleen Stan was mentally tortured for sure. But I do think that, you know, she did love him and did want to have children with him. And for some crazy reason, you know, the part I don't understand is that she was let out many times, and her and Janice would go into town, the little small town that they lived in, and go to bar hopping together. And would pick up on men and bring men home to the house. And they had a very strange sexual relationship. Janice and Colleen had a sexual relationship with each other and with other men and with Cameron Hooker. So it's just really strange, and they would, you know, bring men home and stuff. So I don't understand, you know, the dynamics of what really happened to have Janice all of a sudden change her mind about things other than the fact it had a lot to do with jealousy and losing control of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, about Marie, why would they have killed her? Did you think maybe she just didn't conform? She didn't break the way they wanted her to? Or...
Yeah, I believe that they held her for a little while captive and that she just didn't cooperate. She didn't go along with the program, and so therefore she was supposedly their very first victim, and things went awry, and Cameron, to try to quiet her down because she was very, verbal and vocal and screaming and yelling and stuff, and pleading for her life, cut her vocal cords, and so therefore she bled to death.
Mm. Is there a direct link? I mean, do the cops have a link between, Cameron and Janice Hooker and Marie, or is that evidence not there?
That's what they're trying to put together right now. I mean, there's a lot of speculative evidence, a lot of things that point in that direction. But I don't think that they had what they needed at the time to prosecute this situation, meaning the story's even more multi-layered. Once you realize, so let's see, let's back up here. Janice turned state evidence against Cameron. The police had some information about a missing person that was supposedly connected to Cameron and Janice, but nothing was ever proven or made conclusive.
Mm.
When the murder came to light, by the FBI, they had to do some investigating, and what they found out was that Marie Elizabeth Spanicky lived with a family in Ohio. Her family, she came out here to go to school in Chico, California,
mm-hmm.
to go to school with her boyfriend. Well, when the FBI started to do some investigating, they realized that Marie Elizabeth Spanicky's family was not actually her birth family. They were an adopted family.
Mm.
And so Marie Elizabeth the Spanickys were a German family who lived in Ohio who had adopted 6 children, and every single child was adopted. However, before Marie Elizabeth was murdered, nobody knew that. It wasn't, the family didn't tell anything.
Mm-hmm.
So all the kids thought that they were all, birthed from the Spanickys. They thought they were all biological children. Well, they were German, and the Spanickys actually worked for Adolf Hitler.
Huh.
Yeah. So Mrs. Spanicky, Dorothy Spanicky, who is Marie's adopted mother, was Adolf Hitler's secretary, one of Adolf Hitler's secretaries. So one of the things that they, because they couldn't have children, the Spanickys came over to Ohio and decided to become adoptive parents of German children. And the German children, all 6 of them, had no clue that they were adoptees. However, they were all of German descent. So there was this huge, FBI situation where they needed to find who the birth parents were of Marie Elizabeth Spanicky, and that took a really, really long time.
Yeah.
Because of of records back then, and and there again a lot of political stuff going on, cover-ups and stuff. And because of the German Adolf Hitler connection and only wanting German children, white children, there was all this other political, cover-ups and different things going on out in Ohio back in, when these kids were born, like back in the 50s, like. So it kind of all makes sense, once you understand the story fully.
Yeah. And it all has a very dark-seated connection. It's all very dark and very dark and dark is all I gotta say. It's very dark and scary is the reality of it. I mean, it focuses in on, how can any human being be that kind of a monster?
Well, exactly. So Marie came from an adopted family where her parents, her adopted parents were, working with Adolf Hitler. Then, she comes out to California and is murdered by Cameron and Dennis Hooker. And then, the can of worms is opened up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, so it's a really tragic story on so many levels. Like, it's a really dark energies and dark,
Do you believe that Marie truly was their first victim, or that there might have been others that didn't go off as well?
Well, like I said, that there's a possible link to some a blonde girl that was from Sacramento, but I believe that Marie was their first victim. But there again, I don't have that information. I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of seems to me if you're that kind of predator, you kind of are that way for life, though, And they say, like with predators and people of that nature that do those kind of monstrosity things that, they start doing kind of screwed up stuff from like childhood,
Right.
Not even necessarily, taking people and making them their sex slaves, but, just very odd, dark, inappropriate behaviors.
Right. I guess, Cameron was one of those oddball, weirdo kids that was very shy, very quiet, very gawky in school, and nerdy, kept to himself. And I guess he did have an extreme habit of pornography. Like,
he had an extreme habit of something. I'll give him that. Probably still does, because prison doesn't change you. Prison just tones you down. But Jodi, once again, the book is, are you still there, Jodi? Did I lose you?
Hello?
Woohoo, I didn't lose you. Woohoo. I was like, right there at the end, I'm going to lose her? Really? But the book is, Jodi's website has been up on your screen all night, but it's www.jodifoster.com. I know you can get the book Forgotten Burial from Amazon.
Yeah.
And it is just now newly released. Isn't that correct, Jodi? Like last week?
Yeah, the book was just released in the beginning of February, and it's getting really great reviews. My website's actually jodifoster.net, jodifoster.net.
Did I say .com?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the screen and reading it off the screen, and the screen says .net, but yet I'm saying .com. It's right on the screen, but it's www.jodifoster.net, and her book is Forgotten Burial, A Cry from Justice from Beyond the Grave, and it goes into much more detail, and all of this kind of connects together within Jodi's book, for sure. Jodi, I want to thank you so much for, being on, and once you get, you do the follow-up to this book, I'd love to have you back on to talk about the follow-up.
Absolutely.
So I truly do appreciate it so much, and we've talked with Jodi before, and I'm sure we'll talk with her again and see bigger things from her, and I commend you for definitely keeping on talking about justice even when people tell you to hush and they're going to sue you, right?
Yeah.
But next week I am going to have on a paranormal group of Erie County, Pennsylvania. I'll be talking with Donald McDaniel, and I think one more member from his team. But those guys will be on here next week on Paranormal Minds. Same time, same place. Once again, thank you so much, Jodi, and her website's up on your screen one more time. It's www.jodifoster.net. And the book is Forgotten Burial, A Cry from Justice from Beyond the Grave. Thank you so much, Jodi, for being on again.
Thank you for having me.
And we will see everybody right back here next week. Same time, same place. Don't forget us. Have a good one, you guys.